I've always thought that silence is the loudest thing a storm leaves behind. When you live in a rural neighborhood, and I mean rural, storms don't just knock out power. They cut you off from everything. No streetlights or signal or noise except for frogs and trees cracking in the wind. I was 16 the summer it happened. Our place sits at the edge of a pine forest in northern Georgia. One of those towns where everyone knows each other, and every backyard ends in trees. Our driveway was gravel. We had an old swing set out back that nobody used anymore. That night, the storm rolled in slow and heavy, thunder that sounded like it came from underground. You could smell ozone hours before it hit. My mom had already lit a few candles just in case, and Dad was pacing like always, unplugging stuff like the TV was gonna bite him. The power went out around 10:20. I remember because I had just opened YouTube. Poof, darkness. So I went to my window. No reason, really. Maybe to see if the neighbors' lights were still on. Maybe just to feel like I wasn't completely boxed into silence. But outside, just black. And not the kind where you squint and see shapes. I mean pure, ink blot out the world black. The trees were gone. The hills gone. The sky looked like it had been painted over. Then, out of nowhere, a tiny blip of light, far back in the woods. At first I thought it was lightning, but it didn't flash like that. It was a flashlight, flicking on, holding steady, then blinking a few times. Off, then on again. A pause. 3 blinks. Another pause. 2 quick flicks. I didn't know Morse code, but it felt intentional. Not just someone stumbling around out there. It had a rhythm, a message. I watched it for maybe a minute before it went out completely. I told my parents. Dad shrugged and said maybe it was a hunter or someone checking storm damage. Mom just told me to stay inside. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every little creak made my brain sit up. And then, maybe around 2:30 a.m., I saw it again. This time, it was closer. Not deep in the woods now, maybe 50 yards from our fence. Same flickering, same weird rhythm. But this time it looked faster, almost frantic. Like whoever it was needed something. I grabbed my phone to record it. Dead battery. So I just stood there, watching, my heart doing that cold thud thing. I don't know how to explain it except that my whole body was yelling something is wrong. I ran to wake my parents. They came into my room, saw it too. The flashlight flickered one last time, then died. Dad called the sheriff's office. Took them almost 30 minutes to get out here. By then, the storm had passed and the moon had come out. They searched the edge of the woods with their own flashlights, and that's when one of them stopped. Bent down, there was a woman's purse in the grass. Beside it was torn clothing, like someone had tried to rip a blouse in half. A flashlight, broken, battery rolling in the dirt. They told us to stay inside. Brought in dogs the next morning. They searched for almost 2 full days. And on the second day, just before dusk, they found her. A woman, barely conscious, malnourished, cuts all over her legs, wearing nothing but underwear and covered in dirt. She'd been locked inside an old shed deep in the woods, one that used to belong to some hunting cabin years back, now half swallowed by trees. They said she'd been missing for nearly 2 weeks, taken while jogging in a neighboring town. She'd escaped whoever grabbed her, but got lost, barefoot and hurt with only a flashlight. And she'd seen our house. That was her signal. Those blinks in the night, that was her saying, "I'm here, please, help me." She survived. They caught the guy later too. Some drifter with a record who'd been squatting out in the woods in makeshift shelters. But I'll tell you something. I still have the window seat in my room. Still look out into those same trees. And every time a storm rolls through, I find myself hoping, if someone else ever gets trapped out there, they'll find a light that blinks back. You never really notice how thin your apartment walls are until the lights go out. It was late spring when the blackout hit our building, sometime past 10 p.m. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through old photos of my dog, Oreo, like a sap. He'd passed the year before, and I still had this habit of pulling up his pictures whenever the apartment felt a little too quiet. My name's Rachel, 33. I live on the third floor of a small, weirdly shaped building in an older part of town. You know the type: beige brick, drafty hallways, fluorescent lights that flicker just enough to make you question reality. It's mostly older folks in the building, a couple of young couples, and me. Anyway, the power cut off all at once. The fridge clicked. The AC side. My phone dropped from 5G to nothing in seconds. And then it was just silent. Well, not completely. You could still hear movement through the walls. Pipes groaning, distant footsteps, the occasional creak of an old door. That kind of quiet doesn't feel restful. It feels watched. I got up to grab a flashlight from the drawer when I heard it. A child's voice, faint, echoing down the hallway. Mom? Dad? It was soft, shaky, like the kid had been crying. Now, I don't have kids. I don't particularly like being around them either, but something about that voice, maybe it was the way it echoed through the dark, just hit me straight in the chest. I opened the door. The hallway was pitch black except for the faint glow of exit signs at each end. Everything else was swallowed up in this heavy, low kind of dark. And there he was, a small boy standing near the end of the hallway, maybe 10 yards away, barefoot, wearing what looked like a striped pajama top. He was crying softly, shoulders shaking. His voice cracked again. Mom! I took a step out, asked if he was okay. He flinched, looked at me, then bolted. Didn't say a word, just ran down the hall and disappeared around the corner. Now here's the thing. That hallway doesn't lead anywhere, just a dead end with a locked maintenance door. So I followed, slowly, flashlight in hand. When I rounded the corner, nothing. No kid, no sound, just a flicker of cold air. I stood there for a second, debating whether I'd imagined the whole thing. But no, I'd heard him. I'd seen him. I knocked on the door of Mr. Adams, the elderly man at the end of the hall. He peeked through the peephole and asked if I was all right. I told him I saw a child crying out here. He said he hadn't heard a thing. Then the power came back on. Just like that. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The hallway looked exactly like it always did, pale, beige, and indifferent. I went back to my apartment, still weirded out but trying to convince myself the kid had gone back to his unit or something. I barely slept. Next morning, I was taking out my trash when I ran into Daniela. She lives a floor above me with her fiancé. She looked tired, said she hadn't slept either. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She told me she'd seen a kid the night before, but not alone. She'd looked out her peephole during the blackout, just to see if the hallway lights had come back on, and saw a little boy walking quietly, holding hands with a tall man in a mask. Said the mask looked like one of those cheap white theater masks, blank, featureless. She thought it was a neighbor messing around, until she heard the boy whisper something and the man tightened his grip. They disappeared around the corner, and she locked her door. She hadn't told anyone yet because she thought she'd imagined it. That's when we called the cops. They did a full sweep, checked every unit. Nothing. No reports of a missing kid. No unknown tenants. No signs of forced entry. But one of the officers pulled me aside quietly and said something I won't forget. He told me there have been similar reports in other parts of the state. Places where blackouts were followed by a child's voice in the dark, always saying the same thing. Mom? Dad? And in some cases, not all, but some, a person would open their door, step into the hallway, and not come back. No break-in, no struggle, just gone. They think the voice is a lure, something meant to draw someone out of their apartment, out of safety. So now, anytime the power so much as flickers, I check my door chain. I check my flashlight batteries, and I listen, because if I ever hear that voice again, that soft little call from the end of the hallway, I won't open my door, not even a crack. If you're drawn to tales like these, consider subscribing to Spectral for more chilling entries waiting to be uncovered. And if you have your own haunting story that you'd like featured in an upcoming compilation, we'd love to hear it. Just email us at spectralentries@gmail.com. Now, let's get back to the video. There's something especially eerie about blackouts in cities. Maybe it's because you're so used to that constant low hum of modern life. Traffic, appliances, buzzing lights, that when it all goes quiet, your brain fills in the blanks with the worst-case scenarios. I live alone in a small townhouse just outside the city. I work remotely, so I'm home a lot, and I like it that way. I have a dog named Tessa, a goofy German shepherd who thinks she's a lapdog. She's protective, clingy, and absolutely terrible at fetch. That night, the storm came in fast. You know how it is, heavy winds, that weird green tint in the sky, and then snap, out goes the power. It was a Thursday, and I remember because I was halfway through reheating lasagna when everything died. No lights, no Wi-Fi, no noise. I lit a few candles, pulled out my battery-powered lantern, and tried to read for a while. Tessa was lying at my feet like usual. But then, at some point, maybe around 9:30, she sat up, real stiff, ears up, head tilted, staring toward the hallway. I didn't hear anything at first. Maybe the house creaked. I told myself it was just the wind, but then I thought I heard a soft thud, just once, like something shifting downstairs. Now, I don't use my basement, not ever. It's unfinished, damp, and full of random storage junk. I also keep it locked, half because I'm paranoid, half because the door doesn't stay shut unless it's bolted. But that night, I felt a breeze on my bare feet. Cold, too cold. I stood up and turned to look at the hallway, and the basement door was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked, just enough to let the draft in. I froze. Tessa didn't growl. She didn't bark. She just stared, tail down, like she was waiting for something to come through. I called her name quietly and she didn't move. That alone was enough to spike my heart rate. Still, I tried to be logical. Maybe the storm blew the latch loose? Maybe it hadn't actually locked the last time I shut it? But I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut. That coiling, primal instinct that says nope. So I did what any scared person does when they don't want to admit they're scared. I called a friend. Becca lives about 10 minutes away. She picked up right away, and I told her, half laughing, that I needed her to come over and check my basement with me. I could tell she thought I was being dramatic, but she agreed to come. She even brought her big Maglite flashlight and one of those little personal alarms that screams like a banshee when you pull the pin. By the time she got to my place, Tessa was still parked at the hallway entrance, tail unmoving. The basement door hadn't shifted. We stood in front of it, and I remember her saying, "If someone jumps out, I swear I'm suing you for emotional trauma." We both laughed, nervously. Then I opened the door. Creaked like it was trying to scare us on purpose. We stepped inside, her flashlight sweeping across the cement floor. Cobwebs, old boxes, stacked chairs. All normal, until we got to the corner under the stairs. There was a pile of crumpled fast food wrappers, torn plastic bags, an empty water bottle, and something that didn't register right away, my old wallet. The one I'd lost 2 weeks earlier and assumed I'd dropped on the street. And beside it, a kitchen knife. One of mine, then another. 3 in total. Becca whispered, "What the hell?" And we both backed up at the same time. Tessa started barking upstairs, loud and frantic. We locked the door. We called the police. They came within 15 minutes. Guns drawn, searched the place top to bottom. But whoever had been down there was already gone. The officer said it looked like someone had been sneaking in, living in the basement, maybe using the storm as cover to leave. Or worse, maybe they were still planning something. I changed the locks that night, got motion lights installed, bought a camera, and now I checked the basement door 3 times a day. The weirdest part? That wallet. It had my credit card still inside. But the photo of my mom, the one I always kept in the clear sleeve, was missing. No one ever found it.